Chapter 11, Rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. So earlier we talked about how vibration looks like a wave or a sine. It has its extreme low and its extreme high, and it goes down and then up. This is actually a cyclical motion if you think of it. Sine waves and cosine waves, those are expressions of cycles. And that's what rhythm is. It is a cycle that is repeating. Rhythm is very closely connected with polarity because it discusses how things go from one end of the pole to the other, and rhythm compensates. If things have to go to one extreme end, therefore it is going to eventually go to that other extreme end, although the higher will impose itself upon the lower. An example I'll use to describe this is astrology and the study of the cycles of the planets. Because these heavenly bodies are moving at specific rates, people in the ancient times understood that different alignments, different positions of the planets were an expression of the heavens towards the earth, that there were correspondences to the position of these planets in the sky, that on full moons people were subject to lunacy and experienced heightened spiritual phenomenon during those times, and on new moons things are more calm and quiet. That being said, our will, our mental thoughts, the capacity for us to create and think within our mind can outweigh all of these different patterns that exist. Sometimes astrology is viewed as fatalistic, or that we can't do things because of the certain positions in the sky. I understand the precaution, but I also think that we as humans have free will for a reason, and it's not about blatantly ignoring the different signals that are being described to us by astrologers or the planets. It's more about having these aspects, these different positions work in our favor instead of against us, to go with the flow of it instead of trying to fight it outright. So now let's think of this macrocosmically. Scientists describe the idea of a Big Bang, the explosion of energy and mass, matter, and form existing in this world. And you could see this as the downward swing in our existence, because that is the formation of gross physical matter. But then the upward swing occurs as we become conscious, as life begins to develop on Earth. That is our upward swing. That is because we are developing spirit. The planet was developing its instincts, its planned will. We are souls being projected into these physical bodies, and in the same way, the spirit of these different life forces projected itself into the physical matter, and it simply kept climbing up from there to the point we are today, where humans are considered the peak of willpower, the ability to choose in this physical world. As far as we know, mind you. We discussed how everything that is physical, everything manifested in this world, vibrates. Therefore, everything has a rhythm. Everything is subject to a certain rhythm. So because everything has its cycles, everything swings downward eventually. Does that mean that we are always going to experience that downward swing no matter what? Technically, yes, but also no. We can actually avoid that. As I've mentioned before, the higher tends to outweigh the lower, and the higher, the positive end of the pole, is our personal willpower, our ability to choose, and the spirit that dwells within us. For example, in this physical world, we experience winters, periods of destruction of the season where things begin to die. However, we as humans have made precautions and prepared for events such as that. We're able to stock up on food for the winter, and in our modern day, we can basically live life normally, even in harsh climates. For example, where I live, we have pretty cold winters, and theoretically, everything around us should be dead during those winter months. But because of modern human innovation, we still have a steady source and supply of food that comes to us. We still are able to buy our groceries during the winter. That is a progression of our willpower, of the human will. In a similar way, people who have a lot of willpower are able to overcome the different mental barriers that they encounter. Mental illness is a very difficult thing to deal with, and the way that it can be dealt with is by seeking therapists and psychotherapists to give you the tools necessary in order to overcome these lower emotions. They are giving your thoughts, your mind, and your ability to reason willpower, the different tools necessary for you to climb and overcome them. This book talks about how one way that we can polarize ourselves to the positive is by refusing the lower. And in a similar way, I think that's what psychotherapy can help do. It is not necessarily like denying it or saying that it doesn't exist. It is using the natural laws, understanding how reasoning works within ourselves in order to come to the conclusion that things are better than how our emotions and our ego paints them out to be. That even though we experience the natural rhythm of life, the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, by the way of mental transmutation, we're able to always be in that higher place, that area of detached understanding, to let all of these negative things pass us by, underneath us like water under a bridge. I think that subconsciously, when we experience negativity, we will try different ways to have catharsis, to allow it to neutralize. I think this is why a lot of dark music and dark art, like bloody visual arts or horror movies, exist out there. It is a cathartic release of those negative emotions and energy in a way that is useful and produces art. There are some people who don't like it, and it's probably because they've never experienced that negativity. So being exposed to it is their downswing. But to the people who started with that downswing, maybe that expression of negativity is the beginning of their upswing. This chapter talks about how the capacity for pain and pleasure are proportional to each other. That as humans, we can experience a great amount of emotional and mental pain, but because we experience that amount of negativity, we can experience the inverse amount of pleasure. We can know joys that other animals or the simple-minded don't experience because of their lack of complex understanding. And remember that it's all relative. What might be extreme to one person may not be extreme to the other. I think that the universe is always trying to compensate for everything that happens or exists. That if there is a negative downward swing, there must be, at some point, a positive upward swing. But it all depends on us. It all depends on our personal will and our ability to choose to go to that direction instead of choosing to stay at that negative place. because it's just comfortable, because it's what we know. We can choose to let in those better positive emotions, those better positive outcomes,